Okay, good evening to everybody. Welcome to another live stream that we have going on today. It's been about 3 weeks. Was it 2 weeks? No, I think it's 3 weeks since we last had a live stream. And let's get back to here. And we were supposed to have our live stream last week Friday, but last week Friday was a Easter holiday, so I decided to extend the live stream for this Friday. Okay, now let's see if this audio is working. Just gonna make sure. Welcome, guys. I see there's about 3 of you watching. Can you let me know if we've got 2 people there watching. Can you let me know if the audio is good? The system here says we've got good audio and that it is recording. Excellent, good. So now, what are we discussing about today? I want to discuss some news. And then there's something interesting that had happened this week, which I think would be a great learning opportunity for all of you. So we'll get into that. In terms of news, I was reading the SA Flyer magazine. And let's see if we can bring it up over here. So, the SA Flyer magazine. SA Flyer is something that I've been reading since I was a very young lad, and I would probably say, I'm trying to think back when was the first time I was picking up the magazine. Probably 10, 12, maybe 15 years ago. That's a very long time. Actually, I'm going to say 15 years ago. And I think that's, before YouTube came about. That's where I was getting a lot of my information regarding aviation, particularly in Southern Africa. Yeah, for Southern Africa. So, SA Flyer, at that point in time, was owned by somebody else. And then along the way, Guy Leach. If you guys don't know Guy Leach, he's very well known in aviation in South Africa, and I would say Southern Africa. So Guy Leach announced that he took ownership. At the very least, he became the main editor for the magazine. So, in becoming the main editor for the magazine, he has a editor's edition, which is this. And the editor's edition, let's see if we can just get the title of it. Here we go. Position report, that's what he calls it. So every month they issue out a magazine. And in that magazine has a position report. And this is essentially the opinion of Guy Leach of what's happening and what's important to note that is happening in the month, and any sort of trends that need to be, discussed. And so in I believe it's this month, April's issue. And by the way, you can get this for free of charge. You can just go to the website. You just go to SA Flyer magazine, and it is free of charge. They used to, and I think this was pre-COVID, they used to issue it out in your typical newspaper or magazine merchants like CNA. And in fact, that's where I used to get my magazine, at CNA. And then, of course, the pandemic came along, and did its thing. So not many people were going out, and they had to reposition themselves, find another way to distribute that magazine to readers. And so now you can get it online for free. And I imagine the reason being is that because there's a high distribution, there is a lot more exposure for their advertisers, and so advertisers are naturally paying for that service, so this form of journalism. So now let's have a look at that report. And he says in the report there is some good news, right? And it says there is very good news for aspiring pilots. The pilot shortage is going to reach critical levels in the next few years, driving up pay and working conditions as airlines compete to attract and retain pilots. I find it interesting that he only talks of the trend of airlines. Again, yes, you've got airlines, but you've also got, perhaps he's also talking about the non-scheduled operators, maybe charter companies, contract operators, who knows. But he says here, the Facebook forum Fly Africa, if you're not part of Fly Africa forum, join it. Humongous group. I think there's about 16 or 17,000 people in the group. But definitely a lot of insight and on up-to-date information on what's happening in the aviation industry. So it says here, a recent discussion is insightful. It says Airlink will potentially lose around 100 pilots to foreign airlines this year. SAA has lost 20% of the initial 87 pilots to restarted operations. Pilots they restarted operations with. They say they need 37 pilots by the end of the year, but none of those they retrenched will return as a first officer with a 300,000 Rand bond and earning 900,000 Rand a year, flying right seat with their former first officers due to the discriminatory race and gender-based hiring and promotion criteria. Okay, well, I can't speak to that because I'm not there. So, but, every underlying story has a reason behind it. But what I find what they're saying over here is that basically the former captains at SAA are not interested in going back to being first officers with the airline and earning 900,000 Rand a year, but particularly with the bond that they would have. And I imagine that 300,000 Rand bond is either for them to be retrained onto the aircraft, to become retype rated onto the aircraft. This would either be for the Airbus A320 or for the Airbus A330. And I'm not mistaken, are they planning to bring an Airbus A350 back? I am not so sure. But for some reason I have that in the back of my mind, that they might be planning to bring the Airbus A350 back. Okay, so it continues to say SAFAIR might be... So the point of that is that, as captains, obviously you're earning a certain amount before, and, the package that they're providing here is not as much as it was beforehand, and they are competitive packages across the borders, continent, ocean, I'd have to say. It continues to say here, SAFAIR might be experiencing the same losses as Airlink. SAMAIR would most likely lose pilots to Airlink or SAFAIR and overseas. Well, think about it this way. Let's say you've got the top operators. May it be airlines, may it be charter operators, may it be contract operators. And so the top operators in the country, or in, let me say, Southern Africa, because the trend will be pretty much the same, would be sucking up those who are, let's call it, the domestic operators. So let's say the airlines. Let's take SAFAIR, for example. Right? SAFAIR would be their captains might be going overseas. I mean, Sapphire has a fleet of 737s, right? And which other operator in the world operates a 737 that hires a lot of foreign individuals? You've got Fly Dubai, that's one. Interesting enough, as I had posted earlier about a week or two ago, Ryanair is coming out to South Africa on the 19th of April in Johannesburg, and then also Cape Town for another date. And basically it's a roadshow. You can, if you are rated on a 737, or not, but if you have some turbine time, some heavy tonnage time, so to speak, go on there. Or if not, even if you don't have any, I would say go on there and just have a look, see what the high-end processes is, what information that you can find, what inside information you can find. Just to get exposure. And so now, if you've got a case where you've got certain individuals who are flying, are going to be hired by Ryanair or going to be hired by Fly Dubai or wherever else in the world, and those are the captains, the first officers themselves, even the first officers actually. The first officers themselves would be upgraded to captains, and now you've got an empty slot of first officers. But you even may have the situation where both captains and first officers, there is not enough of them in the fleet or to fly the fleet. And so where does Sapphire now get their next batch of pilots? Well, I think we've talked about West Air before, and we've said West Air operate a fleet of F406 or Cessna 406, which are turbine based aircraft. The 406 is basically the multi-engine variant of the Cessna Grand or Cessna Caravan, the 208. Okay, so these fleet of aircraft that they fly, the 406, we have said it before, it does a number of cargo contracts for DHL, but that's turbine time. That's multi-engine turbine time. West Air is a pretty good operator. They've got very good procedures out there in terms of multi-crew cooperation environment. Airlink in the past, prior to this new trend of Airlink just hiring as much as they can, Airlink in the past would not question, so to speak, if a candidate applied from West Air. They'll take it because they know West Air standards are pretty high. The parameters for error are pretty small, so it's a good operation. It's a professional operation, and it will train you well. So the point is this: now you've got a whole bunch of people coming from West Air going to, let's say, Sapphire or to Airlink. Now West Air itself needs to find new pilots, right? And where can you get new pilots? Well, maybe from business pilots, or general aviation pilots, people who've been flying, Beechcraft around 55s, Cessna 210s, Cessna 206s, or have been flying or have been instructing, right? And so the point is there are levels to that absorption of pilots, and it seems this is the time. So it's interesting to see what is happening at the bigger operators, right? If we can see what's happening at the bigger operators, then we can get an idea of what's happening at each level of the food chain, so to speak, or job chain, so to speak. Hence why we are reading this, which is good news, as they say. So let's continue. It says, As an XSA pilot, I can attest to the fact that almost every SAA pilot who wants to continue flying commercially is now overseas flying for a foreign airline, so that supply has mostly dried up. Some have hung up their wings and either retired or gone into other non-aviation careers or businesses. A global pilot shortage is anticipated to extend through at least 2032, with North America anticipated to feel the brunt of it as post-COVID demand exceeds new entrants. As reported in this issue of FlightCom, one of the more significant steps being taken to ameliorate the loss of experienced captains is that in the USA, the retirement age for regional pilots has been pushed up to 67. Isn't that something else? Retirement age to be pushed up to 67. And it's not just a shortage of pilots that is creating huge opportunities for entrants. There has been a significant shortage of air traffic controllers. That is very true. That is very true. Look at Cape Town right now. Oh my word. Did I tell you the story of when I called up Cape Town? I called up the tower, actually, because I wanted to see. There were some technical issues with one's aircraft, and I wanted to see if I was able to fly into it VFR, And when the guy picked up, this was, I imagine, one of the administrators, perhaps he was the operating, the tower operator, I don't know. But when he picked up the phone, he was in quite distress. He sounded very stressful. And I just started with, this is my aircraft, ICAO designation, a Charlie 172. And soon, I don't even know if I even managed to finish my request. But all I remember him saying is, contact Johannesburg briefing, I think. And then he put the phone down. It was a very abrupt phone call. In fact, I sat there in shock for a good, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, because I was like, wait, what? Did he just put the phone down on me? Utter shock. So air traffic controllers are very much so needed at this point in time. Okay, so he says, so there's been a significant shortage of air traffic controllers, engineers, and ground staff due to layoffs, redundancies, and forced retirements. Further, South African flight schools are desperately short of instructors. That is true. Without a lie, that is true. As many are being hired with very low time by the airlines. Yes, very true. To that, the low number of students at flight schools, the situation looks dire. Are there a low number of students? I wonder about that. Overseas packages are far more attractive than the local ones. The period, how do you pronounce that word? Gotta learn my English. Perennial question is the grass is greener in the sandpit, which means it is better to emigrate and fly for one of the 3 Middle East airlines. I would agree in terms of pay package, but I suppose in terms of family and all of that, it's difficult. You're far away from family members, so that's the challenge. It says, a poster writes, I left SA in 2008. That's quite a while back. Started as a first officer at Emirates Airlines, earning a salary higher than I earned as a training captain at SA. Training captain. Please note how a training captain can have one of the highest pay packages out there, TRE. Since then, the gap between salaries and quality of life between SA and the rest of the world has just widened, adding to the mix the very good reputation of South Africans abroad. And it is no wonder those who have to leave are finding that opportunities are plentiful. So then, the point he's trying to make, and the point I've made in the last live stream that I did, is that the opportunities are there and you have to take advantage of them. Okay, we are 20 minutes into our podcast. The remaining 20 or 30, I want to talk about our main point of discussion today. By the way, before I do so, I do realize somebody did try to contact me asking about the general radio, and I think that's something I'll have to discuss upon later on. General radio license and restricted radio license, and I will get in touch. If you are watching now, I will get in touch. If you, I did. In fact, I just saw it today. I just saw the message today, and the message has been there for quite a while. So I will get in touch. Okay. So what is our main discussion today? Well then, there is a quote I want to start off with. The quote says that we do not rise to the occasion, we fall to our highest level of preparation, or we fall to our highest level of training or most recent training. Okay, so I'll say it again. We do not rise to the occasion, we fall to our highest level of preparation or highest level of training. Okay? When the pressure gets tough, when we come to a situation where things get hard and you are in a dire emergency situation, you fall to your highest level of training. You may think you're ready, right? You may think, oh yes, I've done this before. But you will find when push comes to shove, there's certain pockets of information or certain hand skills that you have actually forgotten about. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, I had the lovely pleasure of being a part of what is called a DFE oversight. I was a student, quote unquote student, for the DFE oversight. What is a DFE oversight, you may ask? Well, as you know, you have a pilot license, right? And with that pilot license, you have to renew it every however many months or years it may be. Okay. If you have a private pilot license, you have to do a renewal proficiency test every 2 years or every 24 months. If you have a commercial pilot license, by the way, that would be after the initial license, it's 12 months, and then after the 12-month test, then it's 24 months thereafter, or every 24 months thereafter. It's the same thing for commercial pilot license if it's a VFR license. After the initial test, 12 months thereafter, you must have a proficiency check, and then 24 months thereafter. But if you have an instrument rating, every 12 months you must renew your license. And I think in the airlines it's 6 months, right? Or an airline operation. Okay. Now, doesn't matter what license or rating that you have. You may have a type rating, right, for a particular aircraft. You may have instructor's rating. You may have whatever type of rating, except the night rating. You are tested on it, okay? And I have instructor's rating, right? Just like I have instructor's rating, a DFE has a DFE rating, right? As designated flight examiner rating. Therefore, that rating has to be overseen, has to be tested to make sure the standards are still being met. And to a lot of you who may be private pilots or have your commercial pilot license, or somewhere in between or somewhere after, right? To you or to us, to me, a DFE is like, oh my word, top of the top, right? I mean, they are literally top of the food chain. I mean, they are the individuals who can issue out any form of license, well, especially if it's a DFE 1, any form of license may it be PPL, CPL, ATPL, any form of type rating that if they are rated on that aircraft, and if the instructor's rating on it as well. And so they can issue anything. You can you want to go and fly for whoever it may be, let us say Sapphire, or I keep using Sapphire, Airlink, Sapphire, Lyft, that's Global Aviation. You want to have a type rating on the A320 or the 737 or the Embraer 145 or 135. These are the individuals who will give you that rating, right? The DFE. So, them being top of the top, you forget that they actually also have to be tested, right? They actually do have to be tested. And I was the lucky individual to be involved in that process because the Civil Aviation Authority must oversee that the DFE is still pertaining or retaining the standards that they so wish for them to have. And so they oversee that when they do an oversight, you have to have a dummy student, or dummy is not the right word to use, a quote unquote student there that can be used as an individual to see if they are doing the test standards as per cows and cats, right? Okay, so that was an interesting experience. And that, I'm going to move away from that now, but that reminded me of something, that's happened back in 2018. Okay, it basically reminded me of the quote: "You do not rise to the occasion, but you fall to your highest level of preparation, or your most recent level of preparation, as well as your or training." Yes, and so by that I mean, it made me think of the question: why do we do these renewals? Why do DFEs have to renew the DFE rating? I believe, I'm not sure if it's a rating. Why do you, as a commercial pilot, have to renew your license, or as a private pilot have to renew your license? Even as a student pilot, I think, but I don't think you really. Yeah, sort of. So why do you do them? Because why is it every 12 months or 24 months or 6 months? Because if you think of the learning curve states that after 24 months, you are going to, 24 hours, you are going to forget 70% of what you've learned, especially if it's something new. When it's something new, in 24 hours, you are going to forget 70% of what you've learned. In a week's time, you are going to forget 90% of what you've learned. Okay? Now, exacerbate this in terms of a year, 2 years. A person who's just got the pilot license, or a person who's just got the driver's license, for example, is a better driver than somebody that's had their driver's license for 5 years. When you get a driver's license, you're not tested every 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. Once you have your license, that's it. 5 years later, you could be driving in the most horrible standards ever. You're not tested, So a person with a fresh pilot license is better, typically, than an individual who has been flying for some time. Unless, of course, you have those renewal checks in place every 2 years, every year, to say, hey, are you still meeting the standards? Not only that, there is something new that has come about. And so you need to learn this to make sure that you keep up with the training standards or flying standards, right? Okay. And that just led me down a rabbit hole. It led me down to something that I don't think is, particularly in pilot training, discussed enough about, and that is regarding the maintenance of aircraft and the pre-flight of aircraft, which they go hand in hand, right? How well do you know your aircraft? How well do you know the sequence of errors that can take place that can lead to something you really don't want to happen, right? And in fact, even today, I was doing something talking about the POH, right? The Pilot's Operating Handbook, and it reminded me of this story that happened back in 2018, and let's see if we can bring up that story. Okay, so back in 2018, in Florida, Daytona Beach. I don't know if you know Florida, Daytona Beach, but if you don't, it is, of course, in the United States of America, right? There is a flight school there. There's a pretty big, a humongous flight school, well-renowned, to be quite honest. And you had this individual who was conducting their commercial pilot license test. Okay, so let's see if we can bring it up here. There we go. So now he was doing his license skills test, his commercial pilot license test, right? And he was in his last phase of the test. That part of the test was circuits, I believe. Yeah, circuits. So now, let's see if we can get the airport displayed here. Okay, so there we go. There's a map, of course, of Daytona Beach, which is in Florida, southeastern USA. Not the best map, but it's a map indeed. And then we have a picture of Daytona Beach. If you've ever heard of the Daytona 500 race, literally the Daytona 500, the racetrack is literally in the perimeter of the airport. If there are no runways available, I mean, that'll be a difficult situation to not have any runways. I mean, look at the airport. The airport has got 3 runways. One short one, sure, but it's got 3 runways. They're humongous, right? But if there are no runways available, you've got a racetrack right next to it. Very interesting geography, I have to say. So that's where the Daytona 500, the Indy 500 takes place with your NASCARs, I believe. Okay, so now this is the airport. And like I said, there's a very famous flight school which is based out of this airport. You can see the name there. And this student was flying, in particular, this aircraft. This is a Piper Arrow. I do not know if it's a Piper Arrow turbo or if it's just a naturally aspirated Piper Arrow. Could be one of the two, but it's a 201. So it could very well be no, it's not. It's not. The reason why we can tell this is the nose cowling. It does not have the event for the turbocharger, so it's naturally aspirated. Okay, so then student was flying this aircraft, and on the left hand side, and of course the DFE, or as they call it in the United States, the DPE, which is the designated pilot examiner, was sat on the right hand side. Final phase of that test, or his test, and they were in the circuit. Now, I believe, and you can verify the story, it's all over, it's on Google, YouTube, but I believe as they were doing a touch and go, air traffic controller had contacted them had contacted them and, report whatever position that they needed to be. I think there was no response after that. No response after that. Tried again. Hey, where are you? No response. Tried another aircraft. Hey, do you see this individual? They were on the upwind leg of the runway. The aircraft says, yeah, I think I just see smoke coming from the ground, right? So what had happened? Well, they had done a touch and go. They had taken off, and subsequently the left wing had broken off. And of course, you as a pilot, now you're not trained in any of these situations. In fact, what can you do? What can you do in this situation? You can't. There's nothing. There's no control. You don't have any control anymore. You are along for the ride. So, naturally, the plane had crashed. I mean, of course, if it was a Cirrus, then it would be a different matter, because obviously Cirrus has a parachute system. So that would have made a big difference. But, Piper Arrow, this particular model, at the very least, does not have a parachute system, right? Okay, so it crashed, and unfortunately, in that situation, it was a fatal scenario. Both the student pilot, or the candidate, and the DPE, it was a fatal accident for the both of them. And so now, obviously, the NTSB comes into play, right? And they have a look through. They investigate. Takes a couple of months, years, whatever, to identify what was the cause of the accident. Okay, so just even having a look at that left wing, right? So we have the left wing. Landing gear was extended. Okay, the landing gear was extended. They were on the upwind of the runway. And what the NTSB had found out was that the main spar of the wing, and let's see if we can bring it up in the NTSB report itself. So we have the NTSB report here, right? Okay, so the main spar of the wing had broken off. Okay, and I'm just gonna scroll down here, if it will allow me to do so. There we go. There we go. So let's find a picture of the main spar. Let's see if we can do that. In fact, let's just make this smaller. And can we make it smaller? Yes, we can. Okay, fit to page, please. Fit size. Good. Okay, good. So now let's see if we can find a picture of, that was the spar, but there we go. Okay, so now we have a main, if you don't know what the main spar is, it's basically the main beam, just like in a building. You know how in a building you have a main beam that is pretty much holding everything together, or main beams pretty much holding everything together. Maybe you have 4 pillars on the 4 corners of a house or a building, right? That is pretty much, again, holding everything together. So in our wing of our aircraft, this model, many models, you have a main beam or main spar, which is located in the middle of the wing, going from wingtip to wingtip, which is holding everything together. However, the main spar in this Piper is connected by rivets, or screws, shall we say, which is pictured here on the bottom left and bottom right hand side. Okay, and so let's see if it's showing. I hope it's showing. Yes, it is. Okay, good. And so you've got on each side, the left wing and the right wing, the main spar in the wing is attached to the main beam in the fuselage, the body of the aircraft, through these screws, okay, or through these rivets, well, bolts, actually, not even screws, bolts. Now, in maintenance, you've got something called an AD, Airworthiness Directive, right? So there's been a number of ADs for the Piper Arrow, Piper actually, Cherokee, Archer, all of that, dating back to the 1980s, 1970s or so, talking about how does one maintain when one is doing maintenance and you have to remove the spar or the wings of the aircraft, that there was one AD which states that you have to be very careful in the removal so that it does not shear. That is the connection between the spar of the wing and the spar of the body. Okay, particularly where those bolts sit, right? Okay, so AD, Airworthiness Directive, which is issued out by the manufacturer, right? When you're flying a plane, okay, you've got your POH. You've got your POH, and in your POH should be supplements. But there's not only supplements. You should also go to the CAA website, which is, you know, your local CAA, whatever country it may be. Try to look up, and even go to the FAA website, particularly if it's a manufacturer based in the US. Look up the airworthiness directives of the aircraft. See what are the key things that one should be concerned about, okay? And that's going to translate down, that's going to trickle down to, you know, when you do your pre-flight. This is why your pre-flight is so important, okay? So there was an AD issued out after this accident in 2018 to state that, look, hey, in fact, I think there was an immediate halt of all Piper aircraft of that particular model, so that maintenance AMOs, aviation aircraft maintenance organizations, can just check the spar of wings just to make sure of those particular models, right? To make sure that the metal is okay. Because what had happened here is that Daytona Beach is, of course, located at a beach, right? It's very humid in atmosphere, and the salt, that you've got salt water, right? So the combination of the salt water, humidity, you know, aircraft being parked during the day, outside, later on flying in a hangar. But the point is, there's a cycle. There's a daily cycle. And that cycle is that the metal at the sea would have a chemical reaction, which is eroding away the metal a lot faster than if it was inland. You know that many planes, let's see, leased planes that are returned to the owner, a lot of these lessors would park planes in desert environments because it's bone dry, right? It will not damage the aircraft so much so versus if they were parked at the sea. Okay, so the metal wore a lot quicker at Daytona Beach than if it was inland. And this was not identified in any of the maintenance schedules that are planned. If there's any maintenance provided here, you can detail more what the maintenance schedule is. But as far as I am aware, we have your 50-hour check, your 100-hour check. 50-hour check is basically an oil change. 100-hour check, which is an MPI check, major periodic inspection. This is where they check the structural integrity of the metal. Ayobi, hi. Oh, from Algeria. Hello, Ayobi from Algeria. Pleasure to have you on board. Thank you very much. Okay, so there is this 100-hour check, which is the meteorological inspection of the metal. And this is where, from my understanding, is where they would inspect the main spar. They would take the plane apart, engine, body, airframe, and they would inspect if there's any particular fractures, right, in the aircraft. And this is where this error should have been identified, but it was not. Okay, for this particular accident. So, in your pre-flight, as part of your pre-flight, you have to check the documentation of the aircraft. When last did it do a 50-hour oil change? When last did it do a 100-hour change? The next point of inspection after that, I think, is TBO. This is specific to the engine, time before overhaul, where majority of the engine is removed. I think the only thing that is left is the crankshaft, perhaps even the block of the engine. But essentially everything is taken out and a new engine is put into the aircraft. And this is where you now have to run in the engine, right? It's just like a brand new car. You know, when you get a brand new car, you, up to a certain amount of kilometers, miles, whatever it may be, you cannot rev beyond a certain RPM. Okay, but in a plane it is quite the opposite. What you have to do is you'll run the mixture rich. Brandon, hi Brandon. I guess I should do this live stream later, right? I feel as if this live stream needs to be done like late at night, like at 10 o'clock at night here. I don't know what time zone you guys are in, but yeah. How's it, guys? We've got like 4 minutes left, about 4 minutes left, but it's good to have you guys on board. Okay, so now, TBO, time before overhaul, where the engine is new. And in the first 10 hours, 20 hours, you know, there's a certain type of oil that's placed into it. It's lighter, it's more fluid. And so when you run the engine, you run the mixture really rich, meaning the mixture of the air and fuel is higher, right? And you apply the throttle full, okay? And this is throughout the entire, all phases, well, not all phases, but most phases of flight. Takeoff, climb, cruise, right? Try and run it full throttle, okay? So that's TBO. So the point I'm trying to make is this. When you do a pre-flight, and even before the pre-flight, really study the pilot's operating handbook of your plane, okay? Really study the POH, really study the AFM, aircraft flight manual. It's the same thing, POH, AFM. All right. Check the supplements. Check the safety tips, the nuances of maintaining the aircraft. Check the Civil Aviation Authority, or the FAA, the airworthiness directors of that particular aircraft, as in manufacturer of that aircraft. See what things you need to look out for. Okay. Your pre-flight really needs to be that it's your safety. It is your safety. You don't want to be taking a problem into the air. I saw a video recently. I wish I could put it up, but anyways, I saw a video recently of, I think it was a DPE, or an instructor. I think it was a DPE who was checking the rigidity of the wing to see how secure the main spar was. It was a training aircraft. It was a Piper aircraft, right? And he was basically shaking the wing. He was shaking the wing, and there was a bit of a gap between the fuselage, which is the main body, as well as the wing, right? Now, that can point to many things. That we can say that, oh, okay, maybe the main spar is loose, the bolts are loose, the rivets are loose between perhaps the panels. You know, something is loose, and when something is loose, that's not good. That's not good. Okay, and then you can say to yourself, you know what, I'm not going to fly this airplane. You can go to the flight folio, which is basically the logbook of the aircraft, and you can say, what was the last maintenance done on this plane? Were there any particular issues related to this? Right? If not, you can see who did the maintenance. You can call them up. You can say, hey, you know, I have identified this problem. Can I just bring my aircraft in, and can you just, you know, check it out? Because I don't like this. I don't think it's safe. Please have it checked out. Okay? So your pre-flight becomes important. That's one. Two, going back to the original question that led me into this wormhole, this deep dive, was that you do not rise to the occasion. You fall to your highest level of preparation, to your last most recent level of training, meaning in an emergency situation, you are not unless you most recently prepared for this, you're probably not going to perform at your best. So always brush up on your knowledge is one thing, and 2, be very particular in your pre-flight. Okay, check those airworthiness directives to make sure that everything in your aircraft is okay. All right, that's it. Do you guys have any questions? I'm just gonna be here for another 2 minutes or so. If you have any questions, let me know. But it's good to have you guys on board. I'll see when next I'll do this. Just a couple of announcements before I go. While I'm making these announcements, guys, if you have any questions, let me know. But a couple of announcements. I don't know if you guys have seen that me and a fellow follower have actually started a podcast. Donald and I have started a podcast on this channel. It's not a live podcast, but it is it's a recorded podcast. And essentially, we are going to be interviewing different individuals from the industry, so to speak, from the early sides of aviation, right? The first one was actually published this past, it was supposed to be Wednesday, but I did not realize how long it takes to render a video. For YouTube to process an SD standard video or HD video. Yo, DR Aviation, how's it going? Or DVR Aviator, sorry. So yeah, that actually, it took 24 hours for it to process. So it actually was released on a Thursday instead of a Wednesday. Okay, so we started that podcast, loved it. We interviewed three CPR pilots at 3 different stages. One basically midpoint, one who's almost finished, and one who has finished. So go check it out. We talked about the different motivations in getting into aviation, the different challenges in trying to get a commercial pilot license. And so the next couple of ones that we are going to be doing, we want to interview instructors, see what it is as a career as an instructor, what are the biggest lessons that I've learned as a pilot, as an instructor, those who are experienced instructors, so to speak. And we want to interview a safety officer as well as maintenance provider. We also want to interview a business owner. And we also want to interview, who else is it? I think it was a game pilot, as in a national park pilot. There's others. There's a lot. Okay, there's a lot. And so really looking forward to putting these out. We are busy in the production phase of it to put out these episodes. So check those. Those podcasts are going to be released on the Wednesday slot. As you know, every 2 weeks I release a long form video, so I'm going to use the Wednesday slot to release those podcasts. So check that out. So that's one announcement, number 1. What's another announcement? Yeah, so the next live stream I think will be out, and we'll do it again in another 2 weeks or so. We'll see how the schedule goes, but I'll keep you updated with a community post. That is about it. There's that Ryanair recruitment on the 19th of April in South Africa, Johannesburg. Like I said, check it out if you're there in the country. There is also on the 6th of May, I think, an air show taking place at Swartkops Air Force Base. That should be pretty cool to see as well. But generally, there's one that happens every month end at the Air Force Museum at Swartkops. But then this one is a bigger air show event, so check that out too. All right, guys, thanks you very much for listening in, for watching, and I will check you guys next time. Cheers. Have a good night or good day or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world.